I think that the most honest question that I can ask when I witness harm in the world is not how do I stop them, but it's actually where is it in me? The most responsible and transformative question that's available to any human being who wants things to change is where do I also have these impulses? Where might I reach for control when I've forgotten my worth or when I'm afraid? Where do I dominate in small ways? Where do I coerce people behind closed doors or in quiet ways? Where do I take from another or at another's expense in such subtle ways that we can almost convince ourselves that they don't exist? This is what's called shadow work. Well, hello and welcome back. Today we are picking up where we left off on part one of this conversation. This conversation was about spiritual leaders who are falling and what really is happening, whether they are really accountable for their actions, whether we're expecting too much of them. And then at the end, I was talking about frozen places, emotional numbness. I was talking about my own experience of putting a wall between my heart and my mind as a way of staying safe as a child, and how sometimes those frozen places, at least for me and maybe for you too, sometimes show up and it looks like maybe I don't care or that I'm cold. And just like I always think everything is our teacher, is here for us. Anything that's happening in life, we can use it for our own self awareness, for our own self growth, for our own healing. And I see the frozen places as that as well. I'll speak for myself, and I just wonder if you can see this in you too, that they're a doorway in understanding where I'm still numb, where I can heal, and where my unprocessed pain is keeping me from showing up fully for the suffering that I witness. Now, a lot of people don't even know this is happening. They really don't. They may just be too busy. They may just not slow down to really feel it. Maybe they even wonder if they'd get overwhelmed or engulfed, or maybe they're just analyzing it. They're just analyzing the wars and they're analyzing the things that are happening. And those are excellent ways to keep from really feeling the gravity of the things that are happening. And I notice for me that sometimes I feel the gravity and sometimes I don't. Some of this is healthy compartmentalization. I mean, listen, if you let every single thing touch you so deeply, especially in the world that we're living in right now, it can be a lot. It can really take you down. So I think there's some balance to all of this, but I think maybe we know the difference. Maybe we know the difference between when we have a healthy level of compartmentalization and emotional distance and when we're disconnected a little bit, where we're a little bit disengaged from what's happening. And I just think that there's an opportunity, if we desire to use it, to say, oh, maybe that's a place I had to numb out from. Maybe that thing that I'm watching is touching something in me that I have not been willing to look at or explore or feel. And it doesn't mean you have to go do something right now, but it's just almost like instead of feeling guilty or feeling some shame around it, or just saying, I don't really care, getting cold or indifferent, there's a middle path there, right? There's the middle path, which is to say, what does this mean about me? What is going on with me that I'm not fully able to feel that? And maybe where did I get wounded in a way where it's hard for me to feel in this situation? And I think that when we can look at things from this point of view, we don't have to be perfect, but that we also don't have our head in the sand. And we recognize that all of us are dealing with some level of trauma from our childhood or some places where we had to numb out. And I shouldn't say all of us, but many of us. And even just the way that we learn how to defend ourselves and the ways that we learn how to shut our heart down and get a little cold or get up in our heads and analyze. And I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm not here to say that you're doing something wrong or bad. I assure you, this has been my path as well. It's an invitation to consider that maybe some of the ways that you are able to disconnect from what's happening in the world might be because you had to learn how to disconnect from your own pain, your own experience. It's just a thought, something for you to consider. As I said, for me personally, I see that everything that's happening in my personal life and in the broader scale of the world is always there, providing me an opportunity to take a deeper look at myself and to take a deeper level of responsibility. And so I want to take this a little bit further today. I want to talk about something that lives at the very heart of why I do this work, of the way that I navigate the world, of what I desire for the world. When I look at the world, when I really look at the world, there's no question there's immense suffering in many pockets, whether that be wars that are displacing people, children who are violated. There are still far too many people who live each and every day so hungry. And if it's not actual deep starvation, which is horrific, there are a lot of people who are food insecure. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. And we are still dealing with oppression on many levels. And there's no question that there is a particular cruelty of human beings toward each other, toward one another. But I also see beneath all of that sort of an aching or a longing. And I think it's for the people who are causing harm and the people who are on the receiving end of harm. At some deep level, we are all longing to be seen, to feel safe, to belong, and to be loved in a way that it doesn't cost them themselves, to be loved for who they are. And I think we're not as different as we appear. And I certainly think we're not as separate as we appear. At some deep level, we're all connected. I mean, there are just too many times that I and other people have shared experiences that are so synchronistic. They seem random, like random happenstance, but maybe it's not as random. On a spiritual level, we are one, I don't know, one interconnected being. Our souls are connected. When I think about an actual human body, I think about all of the cells in the human body. And I think how all of those little cells are both working together and also working independently. They all have different roles and different goals and different ways of acting. And they may all think of themselves as little independent beings, down to the tiniest, minuscule little cell in our body and smaller. But we think of all of those cells as us, as interdependent, as connected internally, right? They're all us. I think that at a bigger scale, that's true for us as well, that we are part of something bigger. We are all connected. Some people might say we are all one. We are literally one, just like our cells individually may have their own little roles and goals, their own little work that they have to do, but they are part of the one, which is me, my body, or your body. And so if you get a disease in your body, it affects your whole body. Let's just say that you end up with a cancer. Something goes wrong and your cells are doing the wrong things. and that becomes a cancer. That has the potential to affect so many other organs in your body, all of the cells, and it could potentially result in dire circumstances. It's all interconnected. And I think that's the same for all of us. So that suffering that's happening on the other side of the world isn't really as separate from me as my brain will have me believe. I don't even fully understand, and they certainly can't fully articulate that their suffering is also mine, but I genuinely do believe it. It's almost like I know it at some level, but I've also been so conditioned to believe myself to be a separate being. And so sometimes I just touch it a little bit here and there, that my pain is their pain and their pain is my pain, but also my joy is theirs and their joy is mine. Their longings are mine, and their humanity, no matter how disfigured their humanity is. I don't know if that's the right word for it. No matter how wounded, no matter how conditioned, no matter how I might perceive to be wrong, they are. At some level, they are me and I am them. I've often thought to myself, if I were to have walked a mile in their shoes, or if I had their life, being raised in their zip code with their parents, with their siblings, with their genetics, with their exact experiences, with their exact limitations, with their education, with their sacrifices and their challenges, with their traumas, might I do exactly what they are doing right now? Might I choose, let's just say someone who's causing harm to somebody, might I choose to do exactly that? Might my coping mechanisms and my defense mechanisms be the same as theirs? And is the only reason why I do things differently is because I was raised in a very different way. And other people might look at what I do and perceive it to be wrong. So, in some way, I think it's not that I can't be discerning and hold people accountable, not at all. I believe people are absolutely accountable for their actions. I do believe that even though on a spiritual level and on some level, I totally 100% subscribe to the way that I'm talking about right now, I also recognize that we also live in a society where we have to hold each other accountable. And I also believe that we are here to evolve. I believe that each human instance is part of the evolution of humanity. And so, us doing better, us learning how to be in the midst of our circumstances and then still rise above them and choose to not cause harm to people, or if we cause harm to people, to take responsibility, to repair, to restore trust and to change. Oh my God, yes, 100%. But I do think that it's to people's detriment to only categorize people as good and bad. And I think that is to the detriment of people who categorize and also those who are being categorized. Because either one of them, what we're doing is we're saying we're rejecting a person or a part of humanity. And I think that we can hold both. I think we can see something as wrong or inappropriate. We can hold people accountable, but we also can have compassion for how they got there. I know that it's not easy to look at things from that point of view. And somehow I was born to see things from that point of view. For most of my life, I have been a what ifer and a questioner and a but why and um, questioning. And I'm always adding an and to things like, well, and this. So I know that I don't think the way that everyone thinks, but I also know that I wasn't put here to think that way and not share that. because I think it's time for an invitation for more both ands than either ors, more long term. How does this affect us? Than zero sum game, make decisions right now. And I think it's not just about kindness. I really don't. I don't think it's just about kindness. I think it's more than that. I think it's how we do move to the next stage of evolution. I think it's imperative. So I don't just do this from a place of kindness, to be honest with you. Sometimes it's not even as much an emotional thing. It's more of a, let me think here. It's not so much that I'm looking at that other person and then I'm just overwhelmed with compassion for them. It's just that I'm able to see their perspective. I'm able to honor the possibility that I'm able to perhaps live in this world in a more pro social way because of my circumstances. And if we're truly one, and if there is less of a boundary between you and me, or between them and us, if it's more permeable than we've been conditioned to believe, or that we've been taught, or that we just think, then I think that the most honest question that I can ask when I witness harm in the world is not so much how do I stop them, but it's actually where is it in me? And I'm going to just let you take a moment with that because I can imagine that that feels uncomfortable. Like, no, that is crazy. I'm just not that way. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but I'll just want to introduce the concept that this is what's called shadow work. And honestly, what we see on the public stage right now is very much a representation of the collective shadow, of all of the ways that we have cut off from aspects of ourselves, aspects of humanity, trying to be a certain way, trying to project a certain image, that leaders need to look a certain way. And then those leaders often do in the public's eyes, but oftentimes personally, they can't keep it together because behind closed doors, they're still feeling all the human impulses. They're still experiencing what it's like to be a full human with a full human range of emotions and experiences and impulses. And I recognize that many of you who are listening are saying, yeah, but I don't do those things. I don't show up that way. Like, I am a fine, upstanding individual and contributor to society. I'm a good parent. I pay my bills. I don't harm people. And I totally get that. I consider myself to be in that camp to a large degree. So I'm not trying to suggest that you would ever want to act out those things or to not be a good person. I'm just suggesting that there could be a question that we ask ourselves. If we believe we're interconnected, we are all one. If we believe that there's a full range of human impulses, feelings, reactions, and that depending on our circumstances, we might act them out differently. Well, then the question is just, where is this in me? And I invite you to always keep in the back of your mind, could this be spiritual bypassing or a way that's softening what's genuinely wrong? But I don't think so. I don't really think so. I think we can look directly in the eye of bad behavior, of harmful action, of crime, even the most reprehensible behaviors. But as long as we point our finger out there and away from ourselves, well, for one, we take away our power because we basically say those people need to change and do better in order for our world to be better. I think all of us need to take a hard look at our own ways that we show up and cause harm. I think the most responsible and transformative question that's available to any human being who wants things to change is, where do I also have these impulses? Where might I reach for control when I've forgotten my worth or when I'm afraid? Where do I dominate in small ways? Where do I coerce people behind closed doors or in quiet ways? Where do I take from another or at another's expense in such subtle ways that we can almost convince ourselves that they don't exist? Where does the part of me, maybe a young part of me, who was once deeply powerless and learned that power over others was actually safer than being overpowered, where does that part of me still try to run the show in ways that I haven't fully seen? Maybe by controlling people or dominating over our children, maybe even the way we treat our aging parents. I see this oftentimes around stealing, and I find it fascinating to see how we human beings can rationalize that the way that we steal isn't as bad as another person steals, or that it's not even stealing. It could be that you are at your clubhouse and they have fruit out that's available for the members. And it's really meant for you to take a piece of fruit. It's not meant for you to go as if you went grocery shopping and bought your 8 apples for the week. But some people, they take a bag and they put 8 apples in their bag and they justify it. Or maybe it's that you're at your workplace and you think, you know, my boss, he's just not very compassionate to me. And the owner totally doesn't pay us enough. And so you justify taking reams of paper home, or you justify taking some of the little Keurig K cups home for the weekend so you don't have to buy them. There's a lot of that happens, that we can justify something and rationalize it in our own minds, and yet we are doing it. We can see somebody who is dominant and it shows up in a way that feels like they're being a dictator, like they're just a top down boss that mistreats their employees. And then maybe the way that we're treating somebody, maybe our own employees, it's not quite as bad, but it's a little bit bad. Or the way that we treat our kids, or the way we treat our partner. Maybe we humiliate them, or we want control. I am not at all trying to make you feel wrong or bad for this. I'm really trying to humanize you and humanize me and humanize all of us. Because honestly, I think we are all equal parts good and bad. And we can keep doing things to try to be better. I love that. I genuinely live my life in a way where I try to be as kind and loving and caring and compassionate. I truly do hold myself to a high standard. But it is through doing a tremendous amount of inner work and shadow work that has helped me to be compassionate to those I disagree with, to those I don't like their behaviors, to those that I think have awful, horrific, criminal behavior. But I don't need to hate them or cut them off or desire for them to no longer exist in order to be able to feel safe or good in this world. I feel like it's more important that I say, where do I have responsibility for my own part in this? What can I bring? You know, if you look at monks who spend most of their day just praying or vibrating at a higher frequency, they are not judging and criticizing. They are seeing the light in all of us, and they are trying to raise the vibration, the frequency of all humans and of our planet and of our universe so that we can be in deeper harmony. They're very aware of the darkness, but they are committed to help us to live into the frequency of love, of compassion, a much higher frequency. It's holding the darkness and the light. You probably are already getting this from me, but I just want to be really clear that this to me is what I call inside out activism. I had a podcast just on YouTube back during COVID, and it was called Inside Out Activism because I genuinely believe that who I am in the world, not just what I project into the world, not just the way that I act in the world, but literally who I am and how much I am in touch with my light and my dark, how much I'm aware of the capacity that I and all of us have to cause harm, how much have integrated the things that I have judged in other people. It makes me more whole. It makes me more compassionate. It makes me less reactive. It makes me more open to other possible ways that we can heal the planet, including this. It's not that I don't think we need to change systems and structures. I actually really do think we do. There are a lot of systems and structures that need to be changed. But when we come in as if we know best and we're going to change systems and structures because we think that we know the right and best way for other people to live their lives or how to create change, I think what happens is we often end up with unintended consequences. That doesn't mean that we don't try to make changes. But the more that we have done our own inner work and we're not coming from a reaction to other people's, quote, bad behaviors and trying to make the world what we want it to be, and instead come from the place of honoring and holding the light and the dark and all of the human impulses and all of the range of humanity. And we recognize that the best thing we can do is to do our own inner work first. And then we just might be able to see enough that we can help to create some new systems and structures. But if we don't do this work, then every external system, every law, every revolution, every institution that's built even to create change eventually reflects back the same unhealed interior that created the problem in the first place. A new boss, it's the same wounds. A new partner. We often think, I'm going to get a divorce. I'm going to find the great man that I wanted. But if you still have all kinds of unhealed stuff inside of you, you're likely going to attract somebody that reflects those wounds. It might not be exactly the same as your partner before. It might be marginally better or a lot better, but still, we cannot run away. If we create new systems, we have the same shadows. So the only change that's real, lasting, sustainable in our relationships, in our families, in communities, in countries, in corporations, in the world, it has to come from the inside out. Listen, it has to come from the inside out, but it doesn't mean that we just put pause and everybody just heals and we don't do anything. That's not what I'm saying. We keep doing it. We keep doing the best we can. And we keep trying to create better systems. And hopefully we're a little further along in our consciousness. And each time we do better. And sometimes we do worse. And then we maybe learn from our mistakes or we don't learn from our mistakes. But I believe on an individual level for each one of us who actually doesn't have that much power to change things in the big world, that your most amazing contribution to making the world a better place is actually to do what's hardest, which is to look at ourselves honestly, to locate within ourselves the very thing that we want to see changed in the world. So if you want more peace, then the most courageous thing you could do is to make sure that you have peace in your heart, that you show up with other people in more peaceful ways. I think it's slower, less glamorous, less, I don't know, I guess less like, look at me for the change I made, but most profoundly courageous work, which is the transformation in here first. Now, I know some people will think this is too passive, that we need to hurry up. You can't look away from the injustices in the world. You got to take action. You need to speak out. You need to tell everybody on social media what you think, because otherwise, we're going to make up a story about you that you must not care. It is absolutely not that. It is not giving up. It's not saying that injustice prevails. It's just, in my own opinion, my own experience, my own, I don't know, deep soul understanding is that this is the most direct path through all of that to something better, to a better world. Because the way I treat people and the way that I treat myself and the way that I show up in the world and the things that I do, who I be, the integrity that I have within me. And when I say integrity, the way that I am integrated, meaning that I am not divided from my darkness, that I then become much more aware of my potential to cause harm so that I can see it and be careful with it. I also have a deeper level of inner peace, a deeper ability to be present with people, even in difficult circumstances, to be able to hear somebody who I disagree with. I keep increasing my capacity to do that. And I think the more that we could all increase our capacity to do that, we would cause less harm. I think just being defensive causes harm. And I've been a very defensive person. I've caused harm. A friend of mine recently said something about how compassion and responsibility must be held together in order to see true, lasting, sustainable change. Compassion and responsibility. So having compassion for somebody and holding them responsible. That's not just true for other people, though. That's true for ourselves. No matter how devastating their actions are or our own actions are. Responsibility without compassion is not going to do it. Compassion without responsibility is not going to do it either. To have compassion for our own or other people's humanity, it does not abdicate them from responsibility. They are responsible for their actions. But the only way to outgrow this culture that's built on punishment and shame and oppression is really to shift our own vibrational frequency. The only way to do that is to do the inner work where we're no longer punishing ourselves, shaming ourselves, oppressing ourselves. That we can take a stand for what we believe in. We can initiate change, but from ourselves. And what I know, and I think it might have been Jeff Foster that said this, love, my friends, love is what is needed. I think that there's a beautiful world that many of us know is possible. And I don't mean that as in some utopian world. I don't see that, but a beautiful world that I know is possible. And I believe that the work that I'm encouraging us to do and inviting us to do, it's my devotion to that beautiful world that I know is possible. And maybe not in my lifetime, but I'm not going to stop doing it just because of that. I'm going to pass the baton. I used to think I'd be able to do this in my lifetime. And then as I get older, I keep saying, well, I just need to be willing to pass the baton. And it's part of the reason why I put The Whole Soul Way out for free in season 1 of the podcast, is because I don't want to be a gatekeeper of that. You know, I want to pass the baton. So I'm not talking at all about looking away or being passive, and not at all pretending that devastating things aren't devastating. But I think that love is the frequency from which we can stand. If we fight from the place of hate, and judgment and criticism, then we're really just perpetuating more of that. What if we can come from the foundation of love? We can refuse to accept what's unacceptable, but not from that place of outrage and fear, and not from the wounded place that created the harm in the first place, but from something deeper, older, stronger, and more unshakable than any of that. And that's why I think this inner work is so imperative. Not at all because the outer actions don't matter, but because I think the inner work is what makes the outer work actually work. I think it's actually what makes it work. I think that when we come from that level of consciousness and we're able to make change that does, as the Native American proverb says, consider 7 generations down the road, will maybe decrease the chances of causing unintentional harm, causing unintended consequences, which we see happens all the time. We make new policies and then there are unintended consequences. The more conscious we are, the more aware we are of our own shadows, the more that we won't do things from the place of an unhealed, wounded self. And that could be anything from a decision you make in your own life, to a decision in your marriage or your family, to a corporation, to, you participating in voting or being in politics. Most of us have the most significant power to change within our own very small circle. And the way that you are in your life, the choices that you make to show up in integrity, maybe it's to not gossip about people, because, by the way, gossip is causing harm. That doesn't mean that you never ever talk about a friend, but it comes from the place of support and help, not tear her down so that you can build yourself up. The ways that we sometimes treat our children, trying to control another person, trying to make another person feel bad about themselves, beating your own self up, being critical of yourself. There's so many ways that we cause harm. And those subtle ways are so important. What this forces us to do, though, is to expand beyond the spiritual work of love and light or spiritual perfectionism, and to honor and hold that we are the light and the dark, that we are messy and we are human and imperfect and flawsome. This is a much more honest, authentic, aligned way of living. And that means that we have to honor that no matter how spiritually freaking amazing you are still a human. And that means you make mistakes. You cause harm. You have the capacity to cause harm. You are imperfect. That's what makes you a human. And I spent a long time trying to be the one that got more and more and more and more and more perfect, was better and better and better, and had highest standards, had to do it all right. And it's been hard to detox from that. But honoring and seeing the truth of that I'm not perfect has actually been so liberating. And I want that for you too. It's very stressful to carry all of that. Let's wrap this up. So I care so much about you, about the world's children, about all the things that are going on in the world. My heart hurts. I do have places where I can't feel as much as I want to feel, but that is a journey. I have a little girl inside of me who did get wounded in ways that she's still learning how to be held by me and how to feel. But I'm trying not to judge her. I'm trying to just say, yeah, okay, thank you for showing me another place inside of me that I need to heal. I also hold a view that the world is okay in a larger way. I said to you in the other episode that we are all here in what I think of as Earth School. I think our souls are here in Earth School. And even the most devastating things are shaping something that we can't fully understand and see. And that my job isn't to fix, say, humanity's curriculum, but to show up fully for the part that's mine. Everything is true at the same time. It's not contradiction, it's integration. So I guide women mainly, but anyone to the deeper layers of our young selves because I know that's where it starts. I want women to trust their soul's voice because I know that we need to hear it. I want us to tap into our divinity, our depth, our most expanded and integrated self to oneness. Yeah. So there might be times when you listen to me and you think that I'm coming from the place of protection, not from wisdom. That's possible. It is. I will do my very best to own that. I am already pretty good noticing when my ego shows up. But, I mean, listen, it's a journey. That's the only thing I could say is it's a journey. I'm not here to say that there is no ego. I'm here to say, oh, my ego's here to remind me of my humanity, to help me to see where I'm still defensive, where I'm still showing up with an identity or masks or armor. And then to look at it, to name it, and then to keep showing up more authentically. So there are times when I'm teaching what I most need to learn. And I think some of this conversation here, especially about the emotional numbness, the finding those parts that need to thaw out, I think that's something that I'm still learning. But maybe it's helpful to you. So this is what I call the whole soul way. And if you haven't already done it, I invite you to go to season 1 and you can take all 40 lessons of the whole soul way on YouTube or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, because it's there for free. And you can get the workbooks. And I think it's a pretty amazing training. You being you, you discovering more of you finding your most genuine whole self is the biggest contribution that you can make, that any of us can make to the world. And I'll leave it there. All right. Thanks. Thanks for being here.